Shabbat Shalom, welcome. So I had a little bit of a hiccup there. I was trying to get all my windows in order. Welcome to Torah HaDorshot. My name is Hillary. I'm a Kohenet in training, and this is part of my priestess project. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm in a little bit of a flutter because yesterday I saw the smicha, the ordination for cohort Tet Aleph. So I don't know if anyone from the cohort watches these, but if you do, Mazel Tov Tet Aleph, lots of love to Tet Bet, who's still on their Kohenet journey with us. I have been painting this room, so it is emptier than it usually is. And I'm hoping it's not more echoey than it usually is, but I'm afraid it might be. I did do some audio tests before this, but it's kind of hard to I have a feeling this is something I'm going to find out after I download and listen to the footage. So, but certainly let me know. Also, feel free at any time in the chat to comment on what I'm talking about. I know most of the people who watch this don't have Twitch accounts or watch it after, which is totally fine. But if you are able to use the chat and you want to say hello, please feel free to do so at any time. Okay, so I'm gonna do what I was trying to do before and get at my window capture. Okay, I got a text from my dad. I will get back to him later. Alright, so we're gonna start with our prayer before Torah study. Shechina Eloteinu Barach Ha'olam Asher Kidshanu B'mitzvoteha V'tzivatnu Lasok B'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Holy One, whose presence fills creation, making us holy through the sacred connective action of cultivating words of Torah. Alright, so our parsha this week is Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a Cliff Notes version, because we're not going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about a couple of things. So at the very beginning, Sarah dies at the age of 127. This is in Kiryat Arba. In Hebron, what's now called Hebron. Avraham purchases the cave of Machpelah and some surrounding land, which is just outside of Hebron, and he purchases this as a burial place for Sarah, and she is buried there. Abraham orders his servant Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak among Abraham's kin in Mesopotamia, and Abraham insists that Yitzchak must not leave Canaan. So near his destination, Eliezer stops to water his camels and encounters Rivka, Rebecca, who's Avraham's great niece. He's the granddaughter, I think, of one of Avraham's brothers, which means she's also related to Sarah, but I think I have to look at the family tree again, but I think she's closer related to Avraham. Rivka gives him water and waters his camels like a good hospitable Mesopotamian girl, and Eliezer takes this as a sign that she's the one he's looking for. Eliezer stays with Rivka's family, who approves of the engagement, and when asked, Rivka says, I will go, as in go back to Canaan to marry Yitzchak. And Rivka marries Yitzchak, and they reside in Sarah's tent. And Avraham takes a second wife named Keturah. Some people believe this is actually Hagar. Some people think it's a different person. I'm inclined to believe it's a different person because I like to think that Hagar and Yishmael kind of had their own life after being expelled from the household. The sons of Avraham and Keturah become the patriarchs of various Arabian tribes, including Midian. Of course, that tribe comes up significantly in Exodus. Avraham dies at the age of 175. Yitzhak and Yishmael reunite to bury Avraham at Machpelah, where Sarah is buried. I find this very moving. I really like that they are reunited because, obviously there's a lot of tension and conflict between their mothers when they were growing up. So, Yishmael, who marries an Egyptian woman, has many children and lives to be 137. He doesn't die at this time in the narrative, but because this is the last time, I guess it's the last time we see Yishmael, so it's mentioned that he lives to the ripe old age of 137 and marries an Egyptian woman. First, I want to talk about Sarah's death and wait, what else do I have here? I need to look at my own run sheet. Okay. Sarah's death and the cave of Machpelah. So I'm just going to read the English translation of this. Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Avraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. Then Avraham rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. Okay, so there's a well-known Mishnah. Actually, I should say Midrash. It's Midrash Tanchuma. It's in Vayera, but it's Midrash Tanchuma Vayera. That explains why Sarah dies at this time, and this is very oft repeated and very popular. So, I want to dig into it a little bit. So I'm going to read a whole bunch of stuff. So get ready. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and bound Yitzchak his son. As Avraham was about to slaughter him, Yitzchak cried out, Father, bind my hands and feet, for the will to live is strong within me, and when I see the knife descending, I may tremble, and the offering may become defective, as a result of the knife slipping. I implore you not to make me a blemished offering. Then Avraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Yitzhak said to him, Father, do not tell my mother about this while she is standing at the edge of a pit or a roof, lest she hurl herself down and die. This is really interesting. Until I looked back at this, I didn't realize that I had never heard this part where even before the Akedah really happens, Yitzhak is like, don't tell mom. Mom will freak out. Don't tell mom about this, which is very interesting. After they had constructed the altar, Avraham bound Yitzhak upon it and took the knife in hand to slaughter him, until a fourth of a measure of blood would flow from his body. Satan, appeared and pushed Avraham's hand, causing the knife to fall. As he reached out to grasp the knife again, a voice emanated from heaven, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad. If this not have happened, Yitzhak would certainly have been sacrificed. Okay, so of that part. All while this was transpiring, Satan visited Sarah in the guise of Yitzhak. When she saw him, she asked, What did your father do to you, my son? I guess even in this fake version of Yitzhak, he looks wrong somehow. He replied, My father led me over mountains and through valleys until we finally reached the top of a certain mountain. There he erected an altar, arranged the firewood, bound me upon the altar, and took a knife to slaughter me. If the Holy One, blessed be he, had not called out, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, I would have been slaughtered. He had hardly completed relating what had transpired when she fainted and died. As it is written, and Avraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. From where did he come? From Moriah. Okay, so I also didn't remember hearing that I was actually Satan that came to talk. That Satan not only told Sarah, but pretended to be Yitzhak. So I do not. Sorry, I'm just scrolling about. I do not particularly like this midrash. I just don't think it seems characteristic of Sarah. I think Sarah just seems very, I don't know. She seems very unflappable in the Torah. So I'm resistant to this interpretation of her character. And I understand why people want to want an explanation for why Sarah dies, because it seems very sudden. It's right at the beginning of a parsha. Everyone, people comment, why is it called Chayei Sarah? Why is it called the life of Sarah? It's the death of Sarah. It's right when she dies, because she dies at the very beginning of the parsha. So it seems kind of tragicomic, kind of like darkly funny that the name of the parsha is the life of Sarah. but she's very old. She doesn't live to be as old as Avraham, because Avraham lives to be into his 170s. Maybe she just died of natural causes and is not mentioned because it's unexceptional. Yeah, so I mostly don't like this midrash because it doesn't fit with the way I interpret Sarah as a person, as a biblical figure. But yeah, that's just me. So let's talk a little bit about Machpelah. So I'm going to read here from Genesis 23, 17, 19. So Ephron's land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees anywhere within the confines of that field, passed to Avraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites, of all who entered the gate of his town. And then Avraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Okay, so on my last stream, I spoke a lot about this book, Sarah the Priestess by Suina Tubal, and Tubal theorizes that some of the details of the lives of the matriarchs of Genesis that seem kind of strange make more sense in context when you interpret them as being members of some kind of religious, as being some kind of religious officiant or members of some kind of religious order. So she uses the word priestess, but obviously we don't know what kind of, well, it's an English word. We also don't know what kind of word they would have used. She compares what is known about Mesopotamian priestesses, because Sarah and Abraham came from Ur in Mesopotamia, to some of the stuff that the matriarchs of Genesis do. And I go in more into that in my last stream on Lech Lecha, which you can see on this Twitch channel. And I also backed it up on my YouTube because I found Twitch only keeps these videos for like 2 weeks. But either way, and there's a link to, actually I should I'm sorry, I'm really off today. I'm going to put out 2 links here before I forget them. What I'm about to quote is also from Sarah the Priestess by Suina Tubal. Because the cave of Machpelah and who's buried there might be of some significance according to what Tubal theorizes. So let's get into that. The all-important inference is that the burial place at Machpelah is the resting place of Sarah and members of her descent group. Offspring were privileged to be buried there not because they were sons of wives rather than concubines. It is because they were chosen by the matriarchs as successors. Esav was as much a son of Rivka and Yitzchak as his brother, but only Yaakov, the elect of Rivka, of Rebekah, was buried at Mamre. Only Yaakov married at Rivka's insistence within his mother's kinship group. Esav, it'll be remembered, married out and was therefore disqualified. We won't get into that because I'm doing these every other week because I think it's in the next parsha. But Esav married. Yeah, he married outside of their family and married a Canaanite woman, and his second wife was a descendant of Ishmael, which I think is quite interesting because he tried to kind of marry in the family, possibly to please Rivka, but Rivka meant the family on her side in Ur. Anyway, continuing reading the quote, the ancestors of the Hebrews are only those whom the matriarchs accepted as members of their descent group. As Bakan accurately points out, not all the offspring of Avraham are Israelites. The Israelites only stem from Sarah. Sarah is more definitively the answer of the Israelites than Avraham, and there's that citation from Bakan if you're interested in that. It's from a book called They Took Themselves Wives. And here's the citation for what I'm quoting right now. So, what Tubal is pointing out is, we don't really. Sarah is actually the determiner of who we consider to be Israelites and who we consider to be our spiritual ancestors, not Avraham. Because Ishmael is Avraham's son, but he is not considered to be traditionally one of our patriarchs. because Sarah does not make him her heir. She chooses Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is also her biological son. And similarly, we consider Yaakov to be a patriarch and not Esav. Yaakov is favored by Rivka, and Rivka gets Yitzchak to give him a blessing instead of Esav as part of that selecting of him as an heir and recognition of him. And Machpelah, and who is buried in Machpelah, is also part of that because the members of the chosen descendant group are who is buried at Machpelah. All right, so now we're going to get to Rivka, which I'm very excited about because Rivka is our next matriarch of Genesis. And she is also a successor to Sarah in a lot of ways. Last stream, I talked a lot about Sarah's kind of entanglements with various kings. So Sarah twice ends up in the harem of kings, ostensibly because she's so beautiful that she has to not get Avraham killed. And this happens with Pharaoh, and this happens with Abimelech, the king of Gerar. Tubal argues that this actually happens because Sarah is a priestess and she's engaged in something called a sacred marriage ritual, which again I get into a lot in last stream if you want to read more about that. Rivka later does the same thing again with Abimelech, the king of Gerar. So I'm not going to get into that because it's not part of our parsha, but that is one of the very interesting ways that Rivka is a successor to Sarah. But we're going to get into another really interesting aspect of Rivka, is that she is gender nonconforming. So this is from another fun book. This is really good if you want to read Torah from LGBTQ perspective. It's called Torah Queries. It's an anthology. So it has a lot of different authors, a different author for each Torah portion. I'm going to quote from one of them that is relevant to this portion. Okay. So I'm reading from the quote. 5 times in this chapter, that's 5 times in this parsha, the text refers to Rivka using a word made up of 3 Hebrew letters, Nun, Ayin, and Resh. And this is in, I'll show you all of the verses, because I'm quoting all the verses for the list, so you can look at each one of them. And this word is Na'ar. 3-letter word formed by these letters refers to a young man. In printed versions of the Hebrew Bible, that word is printed in a smaller font and without vowels. Next to it, in the margins, is a correction. Those same 3 letters, but with the letter He appended at the end. The significance? Add a He, and you make it Na'ara. And you get a word which means young woman. So here's that citation. So that's quite interesting. So I pulled out in the study sheet all of the instances where Rivka is referred to as a na'ar, and we're going to take a look at them. So, and what's interesting to see here is also how it is translated when she's referred to with this, using this masculine noun. So we're going to compare that as well. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying anything about it with the translators, because translation is inherently an interpretive practice. So the translators are putting in what they feel is most appropriate to quickly relay the meaning of the passage, but I think it's very interesting to look at. So in Genesis 24:14, which is the first one, says, "Let the maiden to whom I say, 'Please lower your jar that I may drink,' and who replies, 'Drink, and I will also water your camels,' let her be the one whom you have decreed for your servant Yitzchak." So it says, "Let the maiden." This is a very important. We'll get into that, but it really says, "Vehaya ha na'ar." Okay. Oh, and hold on. It wants to use the dictionary function. Actually, let's let it use the dictionary function. No, please tell me what na'ar means. So to growl and to shake or shake off are not, it's not a relevant translation for us. Here, Na'ar says a boy, lad, servant, youth, retainer, boy, lad, youth, servant, retainer. So it also conveniently brings up for us Na'ara with the hey at the end, girl, damsel, female servant. So that's quite interesting. Keep that in mind. And this happens in a very important verse relevant to Rivka, because this is where Rivka demonstrates to Eliezer that she is the perfect match for Yitzchak. And some people say that's because she's behaving in a servile manner, because she basically serves Eliezer and gets water for his camels. What interpretation I like better is that she is hospitable, because hospitality is extremely important value in the ancient Near East. It's very important in the Middle East today. You know, Arab hospitality is legendary, and not only is Rivka hospitable, but so is Avraham. He goes out of his way to host guests that turn out to be angels, the ones who tell him and Sarah that Sarah will become pregnant. So is Lot. He shelters the angels that are visiting Sodom when the people in the town try to basically rape them and possibly kill them. So she's demonstrating this extremely important value, and I think that's part of it. But this is just when Eliezer is imagining her having this value, and he's using Na'ar to refer to her. So here's a description of Rivka when she comes on the scene. The maiden was very beautiful, a virgin whom no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Another thing about her getting all this water, it's a very physically demanding thing to do, to feed all these camels, because she has to physically get she can't turn on a tap, because there's no tap, so she really is really generally going out of her way to help Eliezer, and that's significant. So let's take a look at what this says. So it says in English, the maiden was very beautiful. Okay, Hebrew has V'ha Na'ar Tovat Mare. So again, we're seeing this gender neutral. No, masculine. Maybe we'll get into that. Another one, the maiden ran and told all this to her mother's household. Vataratz ha-na'ar v'taged. And another very significant verse. But her brother and her mother said, "Let the maiden remain with us some 10 days, then you may go." So we have Vayomer Achicha ve'ima teshev hana'ar. I know I'm being really excessive, but I like looking at all of these. And they said, "Let us call the girl and ask for her reply." So again, the English translation is interpreted as the girl, and we have Vayomeru nikra la na'ar. Okay. So Rachel Brody, asks, why is this? What could this mean? One of the more simple explanations is just that in Hebrew, the masculine being the default can be gender neutral. So one way we could translate this, we don't necessarily have it to translate it as young man, we could translate it as youth. Oh. Come on, Sepharia. Give me Na'ar. Okay. Yeah, and we have it in the translation on Sepharia too. Youth. So it's just being used as a generic, like she's probably around puberty. She is just a youth, and it doesn't even need to be gender specific. Or Brody says it could be that she's in this kind of in-between development stage where she's doesn't have to act in such an overtly gendered way. Or that she is described that way because she behaves in a way that's traditionally masculine. She's very physically strong. She goes out on her own to get water. And she is the one who determines where her life will take her. Her mother and brother ask her, "Do you want to go to marry this guy?" And she says, "Elech, I will go." But let's read a quote from Brody in Torah Queries. Rebecca may have been physiologically and emotionally more of a na'ar, while presenting to the world the image of, making people read her as, a na'ara. Indeed, that seems to be how the servant sees her and exactly what he's looking for, an ideal partner for Yitzchak, a human manifestation of the divine gift of gender that is given to each of us in full spectrum. And Brody also notes that na'ar is also what is used to describe Dinah, who has a very different and tragic end to when she goes out of her home. Which we'll get to it at some other time. But that's all. So it's all quite interesting because there are definitely a couple ways you can interpret it. Okay, so let's. Okay, so I'm going to read more in depth into this part of Genesis 24, 51 to 58. Here is Rivka before you, take her and go, and let her be a wife to your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. So this is Rivka's family speaking to Eliezer. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed low to the ground before the Lord. This waving my neighbor out the window. The servant brought out objects of silver and gold and garments and gave them to Rivka. And he gave presents to her brother and her mother. Then he and the men with him ate and drank, and they spent the night. When they rose the next morning, he said, "Give me leave to go to my master." But her brother and mother said, "Let the maiden remain with us some 10 days, then you may go." What does this note? I won't open the note. Okay. There's some people who interpret this as like a hesitance. That they're not as eager for this match as they initially appear. And we'll get to Baal, who specifically thinks it's Rivka's mother who is hesitant. I was listening to the Kehillat Israel podcast, which is a very fun Torah study podcast by that's hosted by a Reconstructionist shul in California, and the Rabbi Amy Bernstein. Rabbi Amy Bernstein, who's typically the host, comments that it actually might have just been a cultural thing that having an engagement, they wanted to have a celebration, have a big party in Rivka's honor, and it didn't really have anything to do with hesitancy. It was the custom. It's like, well, she just got engaged. We're gonna celebrate it. She's not gonna go with you right now. But regardless, he said to them, "Do not delay me. Now that the Lord has made my errand successful, give me leave that I may go to my master." And they said, "Let us call the girl, the Na'ar, and ask for her reply." They called Rivka and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will. I will go." So here's a little bit later in the Parsha. So they sent off their sister Rivka and her nurse along with Avraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rivka and said to her, "O sister, may you grow into thousands of myriads. May your offspring seize the gates of their foes." Then Rivka and her maids arose, mounted the camels, and followed the man. So the servant took Rivka and went his way. I don't have anything too exciting to say about this. I just I find it to be a very interesting language to see her off, and it kind of nods to her as a matriarch, I think, to talking about her offspring being too many to count. Oh, another I have so many things to say about this. I'm sorry, things keep coming to me. I think this is also, I know I said Rivka is Sarah's successor, which is very important, but I think in a way Rivka is also Avraham's successor, because she, of her own will, leaves Mesopotamia, leaves her home, and sets out and will be a matriarch to countless people. So there's parallels to Avraham as well, and I think because they're of different genders, that kind of doesn't get noticed as much. All right, so this part is really important. Yitzchak then brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he took Rivkah as a wife. Yitzchak loved her and thus found comfort after his mother's death. So another symbolic part where Rivkah resides in Sarah's tent, takes up space in her mother-in-law's tent, or her mother-in-law, who's also like her great aunt, something like that. So very much imagery pointing to Rivkah as a successor for Sarah. I'm going to read a bit more about that. I think this is also Tubal. Yeah, this is Tubal. Okay. Lavan and his mother allow Rivkah to make a patrilocal marriage, but seemingly with some misgivings. So yeah, Tubal breeds the 10-day thing as hesitancy, like some folks do. And I should give some background. Tubal believes that matrilocal marriages would have been the norm in Mesopotamia, where Avraham, Sarah, Rivka, and all of them originally come from. And matrilocal marriages, the husband will leave his natal home when he gets married to live with his wife's family, as opposed to patrilocal marriages where the opposite happens. And so that there's more of a presence of, in one home and in one area, of different generations of women. So that is part of the background of what Tubal is saying here. Lavan and his mother allow Rivkah to make a patrilocal marriage by marrying Yitzchak, but seemingly with some misgivings. When the envoy is eager to leave immediately, mother and son request that the girl remain with them 10 days longer, but the emissary insists on leaving without delay. Rivka is called upon to make the final decision, will you go with this man? And Rivka says, I will. Rivka goes to Yitzchak in Canaan. After meeting her, Yitzchak, quote, brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah and took Rivka as his wife. Although Rivka makes a patrilocal marriage, Yitzchak provides a semblance of matrilocality by consummating his marriage to Rivka in the tent of his mother Sarah. Later, Jewish legend has it that a cloud, which had been visible over Sarah's tent and then vanished at her death, reappeared when Rivka entered the tent. In other words, the union was blessed, and Sarah's spiritual heritage would be continued through Rivka. So very powerful successor imagery there, even though obviously it's not in the Torah, it's a legend. But, it speaks to that concept of Rivka as Sarah's spiritual successor. Okay. So this is more Tubal. Ironically, it was Rivka's decision to break the rule of matrilocality, which sealed the destiny of her gens or descent group. Rivka left her matrifocal home to marry Yitzhak in Canaan. Avram sent his servant to bring a wife from the homeland, but he admonished the servant that on no condition must he take Yitzhak back there. Was this intentional on Avram's part? Sarah was dead. Had the matriarch made arrangements for the betrothal of her son? Excuse me. Would Sarah have insisted on a matrilocal marriage for her son, as Rivka did? Rivka was very young when she made the decision to leave her mother. It is possible that neither she nor her mother realized the implications of the young woman of living in patriarchal Canaan. Is this why Rivka was so distressed, why she insisted on a matrilocal marriage for Yaakov, in contrast to the marriages of her husband Yitzhak and his favorite Esav? So, Tubal theorizes that the arrival of the matriarchs of Genesis in Canaan marks a shift away from more of a matriarchal, or at the very least, a society where mothers and women had more authority in Mesopotamia, to a more patriarchal life in Canaan. And then what we see in Genesis is symbolic of that transition. And so Rivka might not have realized that because she was quite young, and maybe that's why her mother might have been hesitant to make a patrilocal marriage and send their daughter to the family of her daughter's new husband as opposed to the opposite, right? So, because I'm doing this every other week, I don't think I'll be covering this parsha, but later on, Rivka is very insistent on having Yaakov get a match in her homeland and sending him back there. And essentially he does have a matrilocal marriage because he goes to marry where the women who would become his wives live. And he stays there, at least for a while. Obviously he does come back. But you could argue that's a matrilocal marriage and that Rivka wanted that for him. And Torah also speculates that the reason Avraham did not want Yitzchak to go to Canaan was he did not want Yitzchak to be in a matrilocal marriage. He wanted Yitzchak to be in a patrilocal marriage, to have his wife come to live in Canaan and to be part of the culture of Canaan and you could argue the more patriarchal system that Avraham was seeking to create or chose to be part of or something like that. Again, it depends on how you interpret it. I think last stream we talked about how it's another interpretation is Avraham did not want Yitzchak to go to Mesopotamia because in one tradition that could be speculated to be one that Sarah was part of, the biological offspring of a priestess would be left to die in the wilderness or would be actively killed, and that the Akedah is symbolic of that, and that Avraham did not want Yitzchak to return to Mesopotamia because he thought he would be killed. So there are definitely very different ways you can interpret this, but it's an interesting way to look at the matriarchs of Genesis. So there you go. That's the end of my study sheet. So thank you very much for joining me. Shabbat Shalom. As I mentioned, I'm going to do this every other week, so I will not be streaming next week. Let me see what the date will be and what the parsha would be. I actually have not yet. I believe it's almost November. I think it'll be November 13th. Yeah, it'll be November 13th, also at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it'll be Parshat Vayetze. So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me. This recording should be up right after I finish streaming, if anybody wants to look at it, and I will start backing up recordings more on YouTube. Have a good Shabbos, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.